It's not a
This
ridiculous
is the
thing to
caliber
say.
of player
What
that
I'm
we're
saying
dealing
right
with.
here is the facts. I am presenting to you the facts of the matter.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Well. Hello there, and welcome into Eric on the Call. It is Thursday, September 19th, and once again, you're tuned in to Eric on the Call, WPCZ LPFM at the top of the hour. We've got some interesting storylines to talk about here this afternoon, and we're going to mainly talk about the world of college football starting off our show. It involves Texas continuing to dominate, and that includes taking the number one spot away from Georgia, who beat Kentucky by just 1 point in that contest. Meanwhile, the Longhorns continue to roll as they throttled UTSA, with Arch Manning leading in passing yards. You're telling me there's another Manning, and he's mobile? We are never going to be free. Oh, my goodness. Week 2 in the NFL gave us some good trends to look at, and, the NFC South, should clarify, NFC South, should be an actual battle this year with the Saints and the Bucks looking a little legit. We'll talk about the Falcons in just a minute. The Chiefs keep on rolling along as a very poor mistake by the Bengals costed them a victory in Arrowhead, but an encouraging game by Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who I would say outdueled Patrick Mahomes on Sunday night. Marvin Harrison Jr. finally gets the ball and, does what he does with it. And, of course, the NFL season brings us injuries, and injuries. The postseason rapidly approaches for Major League Baseball, who has what it takes to hoist the Commissioner's Trophy. Wait, hold on. Sidebar, while I have time and, while I'm on the topic, can we change that name? Can we change the name of the Commissioner's Trophy? It feels gross because Rob Manfred has absolutely soiled that name completely. Again, this is completely off script, but look, Major League Baseball, the front office, announced that last week, starting in the postseason, the MLB will have a new sticker prominently displayed on everyone's helmet. What sticker, you may ask? Well, it's a German workwear brand. I will say it's, to clarify, German engineering made in America. Granted, that's right. The MLB keeps rolling out on the advertisement. And I don't care if I sound like a purist or if this is a boomer take, whatever. There is something sacred about baseball uniforms, really all American sport uniforms, and more importantly, the playoffs and the postseason. To take away a moment of intensity, a bottom of the ninth, walk-off situation, a close camera angle on a player in the batter's box, and you're going to see big letters Strauss across the side of their helmet. Are you kidding me? A clothing brand that I would wager 90% of Americans have no idea who they are, and the American audience is who watches Major League Baseball. I have no idea what this is. It's similar to the FTX umpire sponsorship from a few years ago, and if you're curious, go look up where FTX, the company, is now. Now, the MLB has mentioned multiple times that this is an attempt to grow the game internationally, but through advertisement, really? I think the best way to grow the game is continue to do international series like the London series or the Seoul series. Anything else is just completely silly. Okay, I got it off my chest. We got it out of the way. Back to the actual show. Let's talk about some college football. It was another fun Saturday across the nation as we looked forward to some great matchups. LSU versus South Carolina was an agonizing win for the Tigers as Brian Kelly kept his great record against South Carolina. But it was very tough and it was a very rocky road to get there, and it wouldn't be complete without some testy officiating. Texas whooped up on UTSA as they continue to roll, and the biggest plot line of the week is Georgia's Saturday night victory over Kentucky and how stuck in the mud the Bulldogs appeared to be. Carson Beck couldn't get anything started at all, and the run game was okay. Trevor rushed for 79 yards with 19 carries, which is not bad, poor by any means at all. So we'll talk about how the Dogs and UK, battle that one out and how this looks for the University of Georgia Bulldogs. We got all that coming up, but first we're going to take our first music break featuring a band out of Indiana, The Main Squeeze, one of my favorites. They've been on the show before. They've been on the music grind for 14 years, and it looks like they're gearing up to release their second studio album. Now, that's just speculation on my part. But here is Payday off of their first studio album, because for me at least, Payday is tomorrow, and I hope it is for you as well. Here is Payday by The Main Squeeze on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. It is a good day because I did only have $20, but I just got paid. The Main Squeeze on 98.7 Roar Radio. Welcome back to Eric on the Call, where we're getting ready to dive into Week 3 of college football. And doing that, I'm going to look at 3 games specifically. Let's start off with Texas versus UTSA. A very lopsided victory for the Longhorns as they continue to hook them this season, coming off of their playoff appearance last year. Quinn Ewers looks like the real deal, or looked like the real deal before he left the game. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Heisman frontrunner had to take the back seat, as I said, with an abdominal injury. He's still out with that. Giving the reins to Arch Manning. There's another one. There's another Manning, and he performed, like his kin in this contest. Opponent aside, the backup stepped up and threw for 223 yards and rushed for 53 by his lonesome. And with Quinn Ewers now being listed as questionable for next week, it looks like that Manning is going to get the reins for at least the time being for the Longhorns. And with UL Monroe coming up this weekend, they look for another easygoing victory for the current number 1 team in the nation. A little factoid I want to mention. I believe, I could be saying this wrong, but I believe Arch Manning broke the fastest sprint record in college football previously set by Tyreek Hill. They are he's a fast one, man, and that's not what we need, especially if he's able to throw, as he was able to last Saturday. Next up, LSU was in Columbia, South Carolina, and picked up a dirty, gritty, gutsy win to avoid an upset. Before diving into the game, speaking personally as an LSU enjoyer myself, watching these past 3 seasons under Brian Kelly has been torturous. I don't know if I need to sit between malaise or excitement for the team. Jaden Daniels was a pleasant surprise last year, but it always seems that the Tigers are in between. They have a star before they have the core pieces around them. And by the time the core catches up, the star is already moving into the NFL and doing great and big things here from the part of Keishon Butte, who was arrested for gambling. That's a rough one. In any case, LSU did not have it at all early on in this contest, as Lenora Sellers, before going down with an unfortunate injury, was running the Tigers as the purple and gold struggled to contain a mobile quarterback as South Carolina jumped out to an early 17-0 lead. And if Sellers hadn't left the game, I don't know if the Tigers offense would have been able to catch up to Carolina, frankly. That's a huge lead, and by all accounts, they were looking to keep it going. After a shaky start, though, the Tigers came back a little bit towards the end of the first half, putting some digits on the board. It was going into the tunnel. It was 24-16. Carolina was up. But in the second quarter, Carolina could not keep the ball. They kept turning it over to LSU all throughout the day, especially in the second half, and it came down to a field goal as LSU escaped the victory. Garrett Nussheimer continues to impress. He passed for 285 yards with 2 tutties and only just 1 interception. Helping him was Kyron Lacey, as the fifth-year wideout continues to lead the Tigers in touchdown receptions. And you can't forget about the true freshman Caden Durham, who had 98 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns last Saturday, as LSU is going to continue to need him after John Emery tore his ACL a couple weeks ago. After the win, Kelly was excited about his team as well as staying off the hot seat. And he said this: "It's not perfect by any means, but it's early in the season. And look, it is still pretty early in the season. But 2 games in, LSU has played against 2 decently competent opponents in those 3 weeks. in USC and South Carolina. Both of those games, the Tigers had a lot of glaring flaws. So I don't know exactly what Kelly is saying. And, it's early. There's some things they are going to have to work out, especially their first conference opponent, Ole Miss, is coming up very quickly. So LSU got to figure it out. And as an LSU pessimist, I don't really know what to expect from the Tigers, but expanded playoffs always lends a helping hand. Next, we're talking about some Georgia football, and I had a development come through while we were recapping the Texas game. I'm very pleased to say that we have a great UGA mind with us on the show today, Mr. Hank Tatum. All right, here with Hank Tatum. Hank, thank you so much for calling in, man. It's great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to talk about Georgia football.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of excitement this season, obviously, after being left out and shut out of the playoffs last year. But now coming into this year, the expanded playoffs, of course, and now the main focus is the SEC title. But in first SEC play against Kentucky, things were a little rocky for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the game that you expected coming into that. I mean, Georgia was a big favorite in that. But kind of a reality check, maybe. And it couldn't have come at a better time, to be completely honest with you. Just with the bye week now, before you get into the most daunting part of your schedule, playing at Alabama next week. Later on down the line, you have to play at Texas, at Ole Miss, and get Tennessee at home. So it's kind of while it wasn't a great performance, the way that the team looked, it's a good opportunity to get right.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And you get the bye week this week. You are with Dog Central. You're around the team in press conferences and such. What is kind of what's been preached by Kirby and some of the guys about this kind of reality check against Kentucky?
I'll be completely honest with you. I think that Kirby Smart kind of likes having those games every now and then. And if you look back through the past few seasons, there have been multiple of these. Last year at home, Georgia struggled against South Carolina through the first half. They had a game-winning drive to beat Auburn on the road. A lot of Georgia fans remember Missouri in 2022, where that came down to the wire, and that ended up leading to a national championship where the team won 65-7. So I think that we get these every now and then, especially in the first SEC game on the road. And Kentucky also just typically gives us a challenge in Lexington. I believe that the last 3 times we've played there just haven't looked great. And so I don't think there's really any worry. The worry, I think the only concern is maybe the lack of depth in some positions like the defensive line. Right now it's a little bit banged up, but should be getting healthy soon. So I honestly think that the main goal is to get out of there with a win. And Kirby Smart will tell anyone that'll listen that any SEC game, especially on the road, is tough. So I don't think there's too much panic right now.
Absolutely, and SEC is probably the defining factor there because this season, I've kind of talked about this because I figured this season would be probably the most tested the Dogs will be during the regular season because they have such tough opponents. I thought Clemson would be I didn't think that they were going to lose to Clemson, but I thought Clemson would put up more of a fight. But you have a buzzsaw coming up. You got Kentucky, Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss. They're all on the horizon. Ole Miss has looked great this year. So is Texas, especially now with the dual QB threat. So what are you expecting the guys to kind of learn from this bye week, especially going into a big week down in Tuscaloosa?
Well, I think the Kentucky game poses a very unique situation for Georgia where Kentucky had just come off that beating from South Carolina. And I think a lot of people, whether it was the players or not, but definitely the fan base, national media discounted Kentucky. That's still a very physical, good football team. And they have that opportunity when they are home, coming off of a letdown. They get to play the number 1 team in the country. And all that is to say that every team moving forward, although Georgia's not ranked number 1 anymore, that is one of their biggest games this season. Everyone wants the opportunity to beat Georgia and end this regular season win streak. So that's definitely something that I think is good to learn early on and kind of remember for these guys. But, yeah, like you mentioned, the schedule is no joke moving forward. The playoff situation this year gives teams an opportunity to lose 1 or 2 of those. I don't know that Georgia can go undefeated through the schedule, especially with I think you're playing 4 more teams within the top 6 moving forward. But again, great opportunity to kind of take some time to improve as much as you can in season before you get to Alabama.
Absolutely. And a little player specific here. Carson Beck, through the first 2, looked phenomenal. Couldn't get things going against Kentucky. And, of course, we've talked about how Kentucky is just very underrated and was severely underrated by almost everybody. But when he had that high pressure against him, he's very much a pocket type of guy. He doesn't have too good of legs underneath him. So what are you expecting for Carson Beck to kind of improve and maybe reinvent himself as he faces tougher and tougher opponents?
Yeah, I think that's one of the worst Carson Beck performances we've seen. And that's just because he's been so good. And a lot of that was him having to deal with pressure that he's not accustomed to. The offensive line struggled to hold up against Kentucky's front 7. And now with the loss of Tate Ratledge, that is a concern, is how well can that offensive line protect Carson Beck and kind of make things easier on the offense. But I will say this, in that I do think that you didn't see the full playbook being used against Kentucky there, or at least at all so far this season. Just ahead of Alabama, there was maybe a little bit of reluctance to put everything on tape. And so I think that there was some element of holding back a little bit against that team. And I think that with better performance from the offensive line, I think also it has to do with Carson's confidence and just kind of, he didn't look comfortable at all in that game. I think that started out very early when he was pressured and had to make some of those tough plays. It just seemed to kind of rattle him throughout the game. I am not worried about Carson Beck. I think that he'll be fine. The bye week comes at a good time to kind of work on things. And we've seen him be to win football games for Georgia football. And so I expect that he'll be able to do the same moving forward through the season.
I'm in the same boat with you here, Hank. Hank, thank you so much for calling in today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show and get your insight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the rest of this season, especially coming out of the bye week. Like we mentioned, a gauntlet of a schedule, but should be fun.
Absolutely. Hank Tatum, everybody, once again, he's with Dog Central. Thank you very much for calling in. The great Hank Tatum joining us this afternoon. We're going to roll into some NFL talk next up, and man, I'm giddy with this one. I'm excited. The Chiefs won against Joe Burrow in Arrowhead on Sunday as finally the only headline involving Joe Burrow on game day wasn't whatever outfits the Cody Rhodes cosplayer was wearing at the moment, but he actually outdueled Patrick Mahomes. How about that? San Francisco continues to deal with injuries as they fell to Sam Darnold, and as he led the Vikings, much to my dismay. And in Dallas, here we go, as the Saints and the tease known as Derek Carr continue their hot streak, and also the Battle of the Birds in Philadelphia as the Falcons took a nail-biter against the Eagles in prime time, featuring a huge touchdown drive from Kirk Cousins. We got the NFL on deck, but before we do, let's throw it to a break once more as we have an artist who, in my opinion, is in the running for greatest band name of all time in Ghost Funk Orchestra. That's that name just lights up my day every time I hear it. A multi-instrumentalist band led by Seth Applebaum is described as sonic kaleidoscope. Interesting. So here is a track off of their latest album, A Trip to the Moon. Here is To the Moon by Ghost Funk Orchestra on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. Welcome back to Eric on the Call with myself, Eric Edmondson, and it is time to talk about the second week in the NFL, starting with Thursday Night Football. The Bills once again took care of business against Miami, but the story of the evening was Tua Tagovailoa as he left the game after suffering the third concussion of his pro career, and I should clarify that's his third recorded concussion. Football aside, it has become a very serious conversation if Tua should continue his career, as every single one of his concussions has looked very scary and has looked very bad. I really hope at the end of the day that Tua makes the right decision for his family and himself, and the NFL legitimately should be closely following his health and how the Dolphins are handling him in the future, because with what we know about long-term effects of concussions and playing in the NFL. We can't subject players to poor and declining health when they should be living out the rest of their lives with their families after the game is over and they hang up the cleats and the helmet for the final time. Getting back on the field, the Dolphins' defense in no way could contain Josh Allen as he continued to drive all over the field versus Miami. So Bills continue to look very real. Meanwhile, the Dolphins continue to look flip-floppy, as you know they have for the past few years. Moving into Sunday, there were some actually really fun matchups to look forward to. But before I do, let's dive into Carolina. The Panthers faced off against the Chargers, led by Jim Harbaugh, and Carolina once again lost as the Panthers could not muster a touchdown as second-year quarterback Bryce Young once again looked really, really bad. During the game, Bryce Young looked very dejected and sad, and I do feel for him. Look, I was never a big believer in Bryce Young coming out of college. I really wasn't. I do think, though, he is better than what he's turned in with Carolina, and a lot of that performance can and should be blamed on the offensive line, some of the other weapons, and more importantly, the ownership. Look, it's no secret that David Tepper is one of the worst owners in the NFL and one of the worst owners in American sports. And before the season even started, Tepper stated that mediocrity, this is a real quote, mediocrity will not be tolerated. I feel as though this may have been misinterpreted, as Carolina is not mediocre. There's no mediocrity. They are poor, they are sad, and they are playing abysmal football. And now the latest victim of the Carolina QB curse is Bryce Young, who after the game was asked about his confidence, to which Young says that his confidence is in the Lord. Never before have I heard a QB this early in the season essentially say, Jesus, take the wheel. Young will be benched for the foreseeable future as he will sit behind Andy Dalton for Carolina. The positive in this game was the Chargers, who after a coaching change are really running well right now. Jim Harbaugh, in his squeaky clean record, has come over and really changed the culture of this locker room. And within just a few months, it is such a big thing to do for that. So congratulations to the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh, who are now 2-0 on the young season. Alrighty, let's go to a marquee matchup in the Saints and the Cowboys in Dallas. And I can't be calling them the Aints anymore because they now lead the league with 91 points after last week. I think we all had our interests peaked to see how they would perform against a competent team in Dallas after they ran all over Carolina a couple weeks ago in week 1. And Derek Carr and Alvin Kamara made the Cowboys look like they were in peak January form. New Orleans completely pummeled the Cowboys as the freshly paid Dak Prescott had absolutely no answer for a very well-ran defense. Now, some may say that this is very out of nowhere for the Saints, but let me throw a factoid at you. If you are able to, I want you to look up Derek Carr's stats right now. All right, you got the page pulled up in front of you. Now, zone in on Derek Carr's stats in an election year. 2016, he had 3,937 passing yards and a QB rating of 96.7, which would be the highest of his career until 2020, where he had 4,103 passing yards and a QB rating of 101.4. Carr and his Saints are now tied 6th in NFL history with 91 points through the first 2 games. On the other side of the coin, Dallas managed just 9.7 yards through 3 quarters of play, and with Dak overthrowing every open receiver in sight as well as throwing a costly interception, the Cowboys have to have a long look at themselves in the mirror as they will face a great rushing team in the Ravens next week, or I should say this weekend. And speaking of the Ravens, they have some questions to answer for themselves as well. Baltimore is off to an 0-2 start after they lost to Las Vegas, of all people. And Lamar Jackson he looks lost. He's been inaccurate, and while we all know the real strength of Lamar Jackson is his legs, it's still not helping Baltimore, especially when you keep leaving Derrick Henry out in the rain. The prized acquisition has not had a breakout signature game with the Ravens, and I don't know whether to chalk that up to maybe the new system that he's having to learn and just not comfortable with everybody yet, team chemistry and whatever, or if you just aren't handing him the dang ball. If you have Derrick Henry on your team, you have to use Derrick Henry. That's the bottom line. And apparently that has not been in the cards for Baltimore just yet this year. They do have a chance to show up against Dallas, who look the opposite of locked in, and the Saints. And I know that this Ravens team is going to be foaming at the mouth for a big game against a big-time opponent, because even if they embarrassed themselves last Sunday against the Aints, the Cowboys are still a threat with as much talent that they have. Looking at some scores around the league, Green Bay beat Indianapolis with Malik Willis as Anthony Richardson continues to be, hot and cold. He has the arm talent, but he can't get it done consistently. I wouldn't give up on him yet, Indy. He just give him maybe a little bit more time. The Jets got their first win of the season against the Titans as Will Levis gave us another all-time gaffe. Go look that one up. That one's beautiful. The Pats got beat by Seattle in OT. Jaden Daniels picked up his first win against the Giants Jaden Daniels picks up his first win against the Giants as Daniel Jones wasn't the problem in this matchup. It was the Giants front office for not signing a backup kicker. Deshaun Watson led the Browns to a victory against the Jaguars, who I am already ready to give up on this year. They have not looked good. Trevor Lawrence continues to fade. So mark me out on the Jaguars. You can bookmark this, circle it, do whatever you want to, come back and rub it in my face at the end of the year, whatever. I'm out. I'm tapping out. The Cardinals finally found out that if you throw Marvin Harrison Jr. the ball, you have a pretty high chance of winning the football game as they beat the Chargers, as Stafford and his group fall to 2-0. But we'll talk about that later. It's not the entire team's fault. They are mired with big injuries. The Steelers got Russ a quote-unquote petty game ball after they beat the Broncos, as Bo Nix continues to be awful. Look, I don't think Bo Nix is going to get better. This isn't some guy who just needs to get his legs under him. He played 63 games in college, and a chunk of those were in the SEC. So he had time to get seasoned with some big-time defenses. And Denver hopes that Bo Nix is going to figure it out, but I do not believe in Bo Nix. No. He's not going to be passable in my eyes. The 49ers lost to the Vikings, of all people, and after I spread around all this, it makes me feel sick. After J.J. McCarthy's injury, spent all this time spreading around anti-Sam Darnold rhetoric, I am looking rather foolish, as the pass of the week is most certainly the 97-yard bomb that Darnold served up to Justin Jefferson. For the Niners, it seems like really no one is on the same page. So, they'll be looking to figure something out. The Bengals are now 0-2 after dropping a game against the evil Empire in Kansas City. Now, I've seen some things early on that the Bengals are done for, but no, they're not. Joe Burrow mightily outplayed Patrick Mahomes, and if a few more plays bounce their way and the Bengals get out of their own way, they take this one from the Chiefs. But as the script persists, a costly mistake ends up setting up national weirdo Harrison Butker to send the game winner through the uprights for Kansas City. Before hopping into Monday night, here's the last game from Sunday, the Bears and the Texans. Chicago fans, don't be upset about this loss. Houston is a solid team and looks to make a deep playoff run this season. But what you should be upset about is the startling comparison of play that Caleb Williams is having with Justin Fields in a Bears uniform. It was well known with both of these QBs that they don't let go of the ball in a lot of time. They're very slow developing QBs in the pocket. In Williams' case, he holds it a little bit longer. I'm going to chalk that up to a little bit of rookiness, though. But something that can't be fixed on Caleb Williams' part is the O-line. Similar to Fields, he has absolutely no time to sit in the pocket, and when he rolls out of the pocket, he can look somewhat lost. Look, I'm going to give you some homework. Go back and look up the 7 sacks that Williams endured on Sunday Night Football and watch the O-line get absolutely ran through like a sheet of wet toilet paper. It is terrible and terrible optics that the Bears have heralded Williams as the new franchise QB, the new franchise QB, and yet the way you welcome him is to make him as uncomfortable as possible? Really? The Bears front office needs to get this man some help, or we will rinse and repeat the same exact thing in 3 seasons. Oh boy. You guys ready out there? We finally have Monday night's game. The Falcons and the Eagles. The Battle of the Birds was set in Philly, with the Falcons coming in 0-1 after being beaten by a kicker the week prior. Let's make it short and sweet. Kirk Cousins didn't look great again for 3 quarters. He continues to be a little uncomfortable back there. At least he looked better than week 1. I'll say that. He looked much better than in week 1. The O-line that I was pretty bullish on coming into this year is starting to make me look a little silly. But, the defense is something that a lot of people, I think, expected to regress. That has not happened at all. They held very firm, and I said to myself as I watched this game, this is going to be the biggest test yet for this defense, because if the Falcons defense can hold on to a very good opponent, then, we're talking top 3 maybe, top 3 defenses, and they held them. They held them to the turf. That group looks to hold the same form as last season, and I'm in awe of them. It was just such a great performance by them. Fast forward to the 4th quarter, where Philly held an 18-15 lead over Atlanta with under 2 minutes to go. The Eagles looked to seal the game away as they drove deep into Atlanta territory, and on 3rd and 3, Hurts took the snap and went for a wide-open Saquon Barkley, who was set up to perfectly score and seal the game. Well, there's the backbreaker for the Eagles. They pulled a Falcons. Barkley, who once again was wide open, drops the pass, forcing the Eagles to go for a short field goal. This gave the Falcons enough time to creep through the back door, and they brought with them the man that they guaranteed $100 million to in Kirk O'Chain's Cousins. Kirk, after fighting allegations for a week, stepped up when the Falcons needed him most and executed a perfect touchdown drive that ended with a Drake London touchdown. The Falcons would secure the extra point, but the game wasn't over. Tied 21-20. The Eagles had one more drive with 30 seconds left. Jalen Hurts hurls a ball on the other side of the field. We find Jesse Bates, who intercepts the pass and seals an Atlanta victory. Seals and steals, I should say. This showed exactly what Atlanta needed out of Kirk Cousins. Find your guys and good things happen. There is a lot of young talent on this team. Speaking of young talent, Bijan Robinson also showed out in Philly, rushing for 97 yards. The Falcons will be tested once again as they welcome in the Chiefs to Atlanta this week for primetime Sunday Night Football, which will be, as I said, an even bigger test. Going over some injuries in the league, it has been brutal for almost everyone. The 49ers got some bad news as Deebo Samuel missed practice and is questionable for game day. The Rams have it worse off as they will be without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua for the foreseeable future. So good luck, Matthew Stafford. Isaiah Pacheco is expected to miss some extended time for Kansas City. And, of course, Tua Tagovailoa is expected to miss some serious time, if not the rest of the year, after his 3rd concussion. Excuse me. Mike started attacking me. We still got some showtime left here, and we will wrap it up with some big players in the MLB playoffs, which are just a few more days away, everybody. Hang on. I'll break down who I think has what it takes to make a deep October run. Stick around because we got that coming up after our next break. We're going to keep the vibes high with a little reggae rock fusion coming up. Sticky Fingers, formed in 2008, originate from Down Under. This one comes off their debut album Caress Your Soul in 2013. So, without further delay, here is Caress Your Soul by Sticky Fingers on 98.7 Roar Radio, the student voice of Piedmont University. Welcome back to Eric on the Call with your host, Eric Edmondson here, getting ready to break down MLB's playoff teams and how far they can go in October. Now, not all spots are decided, but don't worry, we're going to talk about the ones that are outside looking in too. Let's start off with the American League with the Yankees. Look, the Yankees, I think, have the best chance to win a World Series they've had in the past 3 seasons. Excuse me. Pitching, though, is the biggest problem for New York. Garrett Cole in 79 and third innings pitched this year has a 127 whip, which is just below league average. In fact, the whole rotation, with exception of Marcus Stroman, is just below league average. Marcus Stroman is actually above league. Actually, I think I had that reversed. So above league average for the rest of the rotation, below league average for the rest of the rotation for Marcus Stroman. They're not letting a ton of runners on, which if you're playing in Yankee Stadium is key because of the short porches. And I don't usually like to bring up ERA a lot, but none of the team starters have a respectable one. Rodon, who by the numbers is their best pitcher, has the highest ERA among the starters. It's in the fours. But he leads in innings and strikeouts, which are pretty big indicators for me that, he's good to go. I think the postseason for this pitching staff is a big key. It's going to be up to Garrett Cole and Luis Gil to really be the X factors there, because Luis Gil has been phenomenal for the Yankees this year. I don't think he's been talked about enough. As I said before, Gil's been dominating. He has a 184 batting average against. Cole needs to be that ace in the playoffs. He has to be. And Luke Weaver also has a 180 batting average against him. The bullpen is a big concern for me. While the Savant page looks good for Clay Holmes, he doesn't get too many chases and he walks a lot, which is not what you want in a closer at all. And usually the Yankees pen is pretty solid, but I don't believe in this group that much this year. And we haven't seen a lot of success from them in the postseason either. So it's up for the Yankees to conquer some demons, but the real tools and the real key is in the lineup. Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and to an extent Giancarlo Stanton and Jazz Chisholm are very explosive. I like those tools. We've seen how game-changing all four of those can be, but how stable can they be? With the rest of the lineup, it can be black holes at times. I think they're solid. I think they're league average. I think they're above league average, but you have to be a little bit more than that if you are going to want to win a World Series. The Cleveland Guardians are severely underrated. I severely underrated them. I love this young lineup. The pitching is great again. Tanner Beebe is great. Lively and Cade Smith all have batting average against below 250 and 100 strikeouts. Cade Smith has 100 strikeouts in only 73 innings. The lineup has some great tools. I love Ramirez. I love both the Naylor brothers, Bo and Josh. But for this team, it's not about slug. It's about can they get the timely hits when they'll need it. In the past years, we've seen that strikeouts and home runs dominate the playoffs. This team doesn't do home runs. So it's going to be about how irritating and annoying they can be. They have Stephen Kwan in that lineup, who is the epitome of irritating and annoying with the bat. Explosivity is exactly what I'm looking for from this Guardians lineup in the playoffs. The Houston Astros are back again. The pitching has been great. Hunter Brown, Ronald Blanco, and Framber Valdez, and to an extent Spencer Arrighetti have been pretty good. Josh Hader's back to his usual self. Jordan and Preston Tucker both have OPSs just below 1,000. They're in the 900s. The X factor for them is going to be Jose Altuve as he goes insane in the postseason. I think they can win one. I think they can win another World Series. But, they're very depleted this year, I will say. They are quite depleted as opposed to other years. And you have one more year of Bregman. You might as well make it count. For the Baltimore Orioles, Burns is obviously the key to this staff. He has been very solid. The pieces around him are also pretty solid, but they have to stay that way. This is a very young group. I think that the Orioles are legit. This rotation's great, but I think this team only makes it past the first round if the pitching doesn't show up. I don't think the offense can carry them past the first round. Last year, they didn't have an ace, and it showed. They got rolled by Texas. Grayson Rodriguez shows up. This is going to be a huge proving ground for him, especially where they sit now in a wild card spot. You need that tough 1-2 in a wild card matchup. The lineup has two bona fide studs in Anthony Santander and Gunnar Henderson, who both, Santander has 41 right now. Gunnar Henderson could, with a week left in the season, hit 40 home runs. Behind them is a solid supporting cast. Colton Cowser, Adley Rutschman, Jordan Westberg has been really good. This is a very, very young team. I want to stress they are legit, but with playoffs being as they are, we've seen some funky things happen in the playoffs. I don't want to put anything past them, but I also don't want to severely overrate them. I think this whole group needs some seasoning. And look, we all want to see the O's in the World Series. They're an insanely fun team. They can certainly make it if they just keep their heads down and keep grinding. The Kansas City Royals are the surprise of the year, in my opinion. The pitching staff worries me. It might be because I'm just pessimistic of those guys they have in there. But, Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo, I don't know how much I want to believe in them. Brady Singer, also, I don't know. It's weird. But unlike the 2015 Royals, the strength of this team is not the bullpen. It's the lineup. Um, Bobby Witt Jr. is a stud. Salvador Perez and the Pasquatch, Vinny Pasquantino, have OPSs respectively of 985, 807, and 761. I'm not expecting this team to get a lot out of the playoffs, but they should they hang in there, but they should make a little bit of noise and be exciting. I think they're a year ahead of schedule. The Minnesota Twins are very sneaky good. They have an okay pitching staff, and this lineup as a team, as a collectively, can get the job done. Pablo Lopez, Bailey Ober, and Joe Ryan, all three have great batting average againsts. But the team needs the stars to shine. They need Correa, and they need some of the other guys because collectively this team has a 109 WRC+. I think they can win another playoff series. It'll be depending on how hot they can get and if the bats can work together as a unit for them to go a little further. They can be dangerous, but it can also be a power outage from the stars not pushing the chips around and being the generals of the lineup, if that makes sense. Then we have the Detroit Tigers. I haven't talked about the Detroit Tigers on this show too much. They have the average as a pitching staff, they have a 385 FIP, with arguably the best pitcher in baseball in Tarek Skubal. He's been phenomenal. He's going to win the AL Cy Young. Riley Green has finally shown up. So has Kerry Carpenter. And, there are some decent hitters around them in Matt Vierling and Parker Meadows. Everyone else is struggling to hit league average. If they make it, that's fun. That's a big if. But, they're not going to go far unless, they catch that bug that the Arizona Diamondbacks had last year. They have better numbers than the Diamondbacks at the moment. Let's say that. Apart from that pitching staff, they have a better run differential than the Arizona Diamondbacks of 2023. Hopping into the National League, it is equally a close chase in the wild card, but we'll get to that in a minute. The Philadelphia Phillies at the moment, much to my chagrin, are the best team in baseball. They have a Cy Young runner-up in Zach Wheeler. He's great, 191 batting average against him. He would be the Cy Young if not for the insane year that Chris Sale has had. Aaron Nola and Christopher Sanchez are very solid behind him. And for once in a blue moon, the bullpen for the Phillies is absolute nails. I expect no one to have an easy time scoring against that bullpen come October. The lineup is also stacked. However, it does have its flaws. The top three can go through power outages. We've seen it happen before, a la last year's last NLCS. Schwarber is more than usual an easy strikeout guy. Turner's the same way. When he's not on, he'll chase anything outside the zone, just slider to an opposite-handed pitcher or a same-handed pitcher. And Harper just has not been Bryce Harper this year, but we've seen this team turn it on in the postseason. As much as it makes me sick, they are a demon in the postseason, but can they keep it going this year? I think World Series or bust for this team. They have to win it this year or else this year's a failure. The Dodgers concern me, moving to them. They concern me pretty bad. Not in a good way, though. Their top pitchers in terms of counting stats are Glasnow and Gavin Stone, who both are done for the year. Yamamoto is getting barreled a lot, according to his savant, but he's looked okay since coming back from the 60-day IL. But who is their next arm in the rotation to start a playoff game? Landon Knack? Really? Clayton Kershaw? You don't want to turn this version of Clayton Kershaw in 2024 the playoffs, do you? Look, you have some experiments to do. Evan Phillips, I think, would be an interesting starter. Michael Kopech as well. And I would have said Bobby Miller, but he just got sent down. So he's done. I like the top four in the lineup of Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman and Hernandez. And to an extent, it gets a little deep with Max Muncy and Will Smith waiting. We'll see with this team. We've seen that big trio, that big quad or whatever at the top completely disappear in the postseason. So it can happen again. The Milwaukee Brewers are a team I'm very bullish on. But it comes down to who your number one starter is. Is it going to be Tobias Myers or is it going to be Freddie Peralta? The numbers aren't eye-popping for them, but I think that benefits the Brewers. They're usually a dominant pitching staff, but I think that, when you're having a lower one, it gives a little bit more mystique to you because I think this team can still turn it on and be nails in the pitching staff in the playoffs. I think the pitching is very seasoned for the playoffs, and I think they're up to the task, especially if you put them in that short playoff series, which is what they're lined up for right now as the third division winner in the lower seed. The lineup is getting it done this year with a top four in Adames, Hoskins, Contreras, and Churio. Jackson Churio has been amazing. They have something that previous Milwaukee teams didn't, and that's, I've said it before, explosivity. They have the opportunity to leave the yard at any time. But unfortunately for the Brew Crew, it could be the same old, where they flame out in the first round. But I think if you can get past that first round, you might see some good things out of Milwaukee. The Padres, I really like them. I really like the Padres this year. Michael King and Dylan Cease both have been outstanding in their first years with the team. Behind them is Joe Musgrove, who has dominated a playoff game before, as well as Yu Darvish. Jason Adam, Tanner Scott, and Robert Suarez are very solid in the back end of that pen, and they're exactly what you look at in October. It's pitching and bullpen that wins you games in October. Manny Machado has been here before, so has Xander Bogaerts, even if he is in the doldrums of a bad season. Jurickson Profar and Jackson Merrill are both very exciting, and we can't forget about Luis Arias, who will continue to wreak havoc somewhere in that lineup. The Arizona Diamondbacks, which is weird for them, it's flipped on their head. The pitching staff doesn't really have a true identity this year. I think they've gone through a little bit of injury troubles, and the numbers don't look great, but once you get in the postseason, you'll wipe that slate clean. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly both proved themselves in the playoffs last year, and overall, I don't really believe in the pitching. I don't like it that much, but it might just be a rough year. The whole staff is carrying a 4.13 FIP. But, the lineup this year has really picked them up. I love Ketel Marte, I love Eugenio Suarez, and I love Corbin Carroll. Overall, this lineup is pretty good. You have a solid cast of Christian Walker, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., and, of course, you're going to have the advent of Joctober. That can really get you far. The whole team has a 115 WRC+. They're hitting well above their belt. The New York Mets, I called this at the beginning of the year. I called it on my YouTube channel at the very beginning of the year, and I was called crazy for calling the Mets dangerous. Without Kodai Senga, you're going to turn to Sean Manaea in a playoff game. He's running a 25% K percentage. The two behind him in Severino and Peterson are really solid ground ball guys. But the lineup's the real show. Lindor continues to be on fire. No one's talked about Brandon Nimmo. He doesn't hit for as much power, but he's solid. Mark Vientos has been the premier power hitter in a lineup with Pete Alonso in it. And, that didn't really surprise me, but now you have the spark plug, and I don't know what this wild card's going to be, but you have the spark plug of Luis Angel Acuna. The Atlanta Braves. Oh, baby. The Atlanta Braves, I'll say this at the top. They can win the World Series with this team. They can. They most certainly can. Anybody can that I've talked about. This pitching staff is generational. Rotation of Sale, Fried, Schwellenbach, and Morton is great. And that's without Ronaldo Lopez, who we aren't sure if he's coming back this year. He might be coming back in a limited capacity. It's just a 15-day IL stint for him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come out of the pen. Which the pen itself is near unstoppable. Raisel Iglesias is in the running for reliever of the year, along with a trio of Jimenez, Johnson, and Lee. That's so solid. Now, let's talk about the offense. It's pitiful. It's poor. There's enough talent to get it going, but they never have. Ozuna, Olsen, Soler, Harris, and d'Arnaud are definitely a talented force, and as I say this, the Braves are teeing off on the Reds, so, it shows what I know, right? But it is the Reds. But they still have time to get hot. As I mentioned, they're teeing off right now. And to get into the playoffs, they're on the outside looking in right now. They play the Mets in a 3-gamer next week at Truist. If they lose that series, it's over. They're not making the playoffs. Here's the standings as of right now. The Yankees just clinched a playoff berth. They're fighting for the first seed in the AL East. In the Central, it's the Guardians. In the West, it's the Astros. The Orioles lead the AL wild card, and the Royals are right behind them. The Twins are hanging on by a thread with the Tigers knocking at the door. In the National League, the Phillies have the best record in baseball in the front seat. The Dodgers are close behind them. And then you have, the, oh goodness, got lost. In the NL Central, the Brewers have locked it up after a walk-off win against Philadelphia last night. They're October bound. In the wild card, the Padres seemingly have the top seed secured, and behind them, the Diamondbacks are falling off quite a bit. And they're now tied with the New York Mets in that third spot. Out of the playoffs by 2 games, as I mentioned, are the Atlanta Braves, who need to have a great next 6 games in order to put themselves into the playoffs. It's getting about time for me to head out, so I'll run down some games for you to watch before heading out for the weekend. The Tigers are up against the Baltimore Orioles. The Chicago White Sox are against the San Diego Padres. I mentioned them because they're close to breaking the record for most single-season losses of all time. Philadelphia takes on the Mets and Queens for a 4-gamer. In college football, there isn't a lot going on, but, there's always the possibility that FSU could fall to 0-4 versus UCLA, which will be very funny. Tonight we have the New England Patriots versus the Giants on Thursday Night Football. Look forward to that one this evening. Solid Patriots defense versus Aaron Rodgers. On Sunday, we have Baltimore and Dallas, Detroit and Arizona. And on Sunday night, we have 2 Super Bowl contenders. The Falcons play the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football in prime time. Then Monday, we have Jacksonville versus Buffalo and Washington against the Bengals. Well, again, it's time that I head out of here. I hope that you're going to have a great weekend for yourself. Make sure that you come back next week as we'll be back at it again, same time, same place here on 97 Roar Radio. We have some fun college radio coming up tomorrow with She Means Business, followed by Back in the Day with J. Ray, and we have our Radio Ones coming up later on. It's going to be exciting, so make sure you tune in and tell a friend, family member, and tell a frenemy that Eric's on the call. Have a great weekend. Be safe. Make a decision. Watch sports. And as always, have a good one.